The stagecoach swayed violently on the dusty Kansas Territory roads when I felt my left hand tremble against my travel skirt. October 1885 brought icy winds that cut through the old wood cracks, but the cold I felt came from within. 18 months of letters exchanged with William Fletcher, a sheriff from Millbrook, who'd promised to accept me despite my affliction, as he called my left-handedness. Sign up for the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. My name is Mabel Rose Thornton. I'm 28 years old, and I carry more than just 2 suitcases from Hartford, Connecticut. I carry the weight of being different in a society that sees my left hand as the devil's mark. All my life, I'd heard whispers in churches, disapproving looks, when I signed documents, and the constant pressure to hide what I couldn't change. The Kansas landscape stretched endlessly through the dirty stagecoach window. Golden fields undulated under the immense sky, so different from Hartford's narrow streets and cramped houses. Here I thought, maybe I could find a place where being left-handed wasn't a sentence of perpetual loneliness. William Fletcher had written to me about Millbrook with such fondness. A prosperous town, he'd said, where hard-working people built their lives far from the prejudices of the East. His letters arrived punctually, always signed with a firm hand and kind words. He'd promised that my difference wouldn't matter to him, that a good heart was worth more than social conventions. When the stagecoach finally stopped on Millbrook's Main Street, my stomach tightened. Wooden buildings lined both sides of the dirt road. A sign swung in the wind, Sheriff's Office. My heart raced. I would finally meet the man who had agreed to love me as I was. I got off the stagecoach with trembling legs, holding my small purse with my right hand so as not to draw attention. The coachman threw my bags to the ground with little ceremony before leaving in a cloud of dust. I was left alone in the street, watching the locals who stared at me with typical small-town curiosity. I walked to the sheriff's office, each step echoing on the wooden sidewalk planks. The door was open, and a tall, dark-haired man looked up from a pile of papers when I entered. His blue eyes studied me with interest, but also with confusion. "Can I help you, miss?" "I'm looking for Sheriff William Fletcher. I'm Mabel Thornton, his mail-order bride." The silence that followed was deafening. The man frowned, then slowly rose from his chair. "Miss, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. My name is Daniel Crawford, and I've been the sheriff of this town for 3 years. There's no William Fletcher here." His words hit my chest like punches. I felt the world spin around me, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "That's impossible. We exchanged letters for 18 months. He described this town to me, spoke of his work as sheriff." Daniel Crawford approached, his expression changing from confusion to genuine concern. "Miss Thornton, I'm afraid you've been the victim of a swindler. Unfortunately, we know of cases like this. Men who collect information about Western towns to deceive lonely women." My vision blurred. All the savings I'd gathered for years to pay for the trip, all the hopes placed on a different future, everything crumbled before my eyes. I felt warm tears stream down my face, and instinctively brought my left hand to my chest. What am I going to do now? I spent everything I had to come here. Daniel Crawford observed my gesture, but showed none of the disgust or discomfort I expected. Instead, his voice became even gentler. "You don't have to face this alone. Millbrook may not have the William Fletcher you were looking for, but we have decent people willing to help." I wiped away my tears with the back of my right hand, trying to maintain some dignity. "I don't accept charity. I've always worked to support myself." "I didn't say charity. I said opportunity." He walked to the window and pointed to a building across the street. "See that house with the doctor's sign? Dr. Catherine Morrison needs an assistant, someone who can read, write, and has good manners." I looked in the direction he indicated. A small but well-kept sign announced, "Dr. C. Morrison, General Medicine." A woman doctor? The only doctor within 50 miles, and one of the most respected people in this town. Something in his voice gave me hope. Maybe my journey hadn't ended in complete disaster. "Do you think she would receive me?" "There's only one way to find out." Daniel Crawford took his hat and opened the door for me. "Come, I'll introduce you." As we crossed the dusty street, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, the possibility of a true fresh start. 3 months had passed since my arrival in Millbrook when the nightmare of my past reappeared. I was organizing Dr. Morrison's medical instruments one January morning when I heard the familiar sound of a stagecoach stopping on the main street. Something about the sound made me look out the window, and my blood ran cold. Frederick Ashworth got off the stagecoach with the same arrogant posture I knew so well. His 35 years seemed to have aged little since our last disastrous conversation in Hartford, when he'd insisted I should marry him despite my moral deformity. His dark suit and top hat contrasted sharply with the practical clothes of the locals. My left hand began to tremble involuntarily. For months, I'd found peace in Millbrook, working alongside Dr. Morrison, who was also left-handed and had taught me to see my difference as an advantage in delicate medical procedures. The community had gradually accepted me, especially after I helped save the blacksmith's son's life using my left-handed dexterity to reach a severed artery at an impossible angle for right-handers. "Mabel, you're pale. What happened?" Dr. Morrison's voice brought me back to reality. Someone from my past just arrived, someone I hoped to never see again. She followed my gaze out the window and watched Frederick talking to the hotel owner. "Does this man pose any danger to you?" Before I could answer, the office door burst open. Frederick entered without knocking, his dark eyes meeting mine immediately. "Mabel Rose Thornton, I finally found you." His voice carried the same condescending authority I remembered. He surveyed the office with disdain, clearly disapproving of my work environment. "Frederick, what are you doing here?" "I came to get you, of course. Your family is worried. Disappearing like that without leaving an address was very irresponsible." Dr. Morrison positioned herself beside me, her presence giving me courage. "Sir, this is my assistant and an adult woman capable of making her own decisions. If she doesn't want your company, I suggest you respect that." Frederick laughed dismissively, his eyes fixed on the doctor's hands as she organized some papers. "I see you found another person like you. How convenient." The implied insult made my face burn with anger, but Dr. Morrison remained calm. "Mr. Ashworth, I presume? Mabel told me about you. I suggest you leave my office immediately." "Actually, I have legitimate business in this town. I represent the First National Bank of Hartford in territorial investment matters. My presence here is purely professional." His words rang false, but I couldn't prove anything. Frederick had always been skilled at manipulating situations to his advantage. "Mabel, I need to speak with you privately, about your family, about your future." "We have nothing to discuss, Frederick. My life is here now." He approached, his voice dropping to a tone I knew well, the tone he used when he wanted to intimidate me. "Do you really believe you can build a decent life in this savage place? A woman with your condition? Come back to Hartford with me, and I'll still consider our marriage." "I don't want to marry you. I never did." "Your options are limited, Mabel. Who else would accept a woman marked like you?" Before I could answer, the door opened again. Daniel Crawford entered, his presence immediately changing the room's atmosphere. In recent months, he'd become more than just the sheriff who helped me on my first day. Our casual encounters had turned into long conversations, and I'd begun to realize that he looked at me in a way no man ever had, with genuine admiration. "Dr. Morrison, Mabel." He touched the brim of his hat politely, then his eyes fixed on Frederick. "Sir." "Sheriff Crawford, this is Frederick Ashworth from Hartford," I introduced, my voice firmer with Daniel present. "Ah, the gentleman who arrived today. I hear you have banking business in town." Frederick straightened his shoulders, clearly trying to impress. "Exactly. Territorial investments. The East is very interested in the opportunities in Kansas." "Interesting. Perhaps we can talk more about that later. For now, it seems the ladies have work to do." It was a polite but firm dismissal. Frederick hesitated, then addressed me one last time. "Mabel, I'll be staying at the hotel for a few days. I hope you'll reconsider our conversation." After he left, I felt my knees weaken. Daniel approached, his hand lightly touching my arm. "Are you all right?" "He doesn't give up easily. I'm afraid his presence here isn't a coincidence." "Tell me about him." I took a deep breath, deciding to trust Daniel completely. "Frederick courted me in Hartford for 2 years. When he found out I was left-handed, he said it was a sign of moral corruption, but that he could save me through marriage. When I refused, he became persistent. obsessive. One of the reasons I answered William Fletcher's advertisement was to escape him. Daniel frowned, his expression turning serious. Has he ever physically threatened you? Never directly, but he has ways of making people feel small, inadequate. He knows my weaknesses. Mabel, Daniel's voice grew gentle, you're not inadequate. You're one of the bravest women I know. His words warmed me inside, but Frederick's presence had brought back all my old insecurities. The following days were tense. Frederick appeared in places where I was, at the general store, at church, walking down the main street. Always polite, always with a plausible excuse, but his constant presence made me nervous. He spoke to other residents about investment opportunities, but I felt his true motives were elsewhere. It was on a Thursday that everything changed. I was helping Dr. Morrison with a difficult birth when we heard shouts coming from the main street. We rushed to the window and saw people running towards the bank. Robbery! Someone yelled. My heart raced. Daniel was at the bank at that moment, depositing the town's taxes. Without thinking, I ran into the street, Dr. Morrison right behind me. The scene I found shocked me. 2 masked men were leaving the bank carrying bags of money, while a third held the reins of 3 horses. But what chilled me was recognizing the posture and movements of the third man. Frederick. Daniel appeared at the bank door, blood running from a cut on his forehead, his gun drawn. He saw the robbers mounting their horses and fired, but they were already moving. Daniel! I ran to him, my concern overcoming any embarrassment. I'm fine, just a scratch. He wiped the blood with the back of his hand, but they took almost $1,000. I saw who the third man was, I said, my voice trembling. It was Frederick Ashworth. Daniel stared at me, his eyes narrowing. Are you sure? Absolutely. I'd recognize that posture anywhere. He looked in the direction the riders had taken, then back at me. That explains a lot. He didn't come here for you, Mabel. He came to plan this robbery. You were just a convenient coincidence. The realization hit me like a punch. Frederick had used his supposed search for me as a cover for his true criminal plans. All his talk about banking investments, his questions about the town, it all made sense now. He used me, I whispered. Even from a distance, even without knowing, he used me. Daniel turned to me, his hands gently holding my shoulders. No, he tried to use you, but he failed. You exposed him, Mabel. Your courage and your observation will help us catch him. At that moment, with the chaos of the robbery around us, I felt something shift inside me. The insecure woman who arrived in Millbrook 3 months ago no longer existed. In her place was someone who could face her past and fight for her future. What do we do now? Now we form a posse, and you'll help us identify him when we find him. For the first time in my life, my difference, my ability to observe details others missed, my unique perspective as a left-hander, would be used not only for medicine, but for justice. Frederick Ashworth had made a fatal mistake in underestimating the woman I'd become in Kansas Territory. The chase was just beginning, but I already knew that this time it would be different. This time, I wouldn't run. The posse left at dawn. Daniel led 6 townspeople, all mounted and armed, following the tracks heading south. I rode beside him, my heart pounding not just from the physical exertion, but from the determination growing within me. This was my chance to confront Frederick once and for all, to prove that the woman he'd tried to control no longer existed. The tracks were clear in the damp morning earth, 3 horses heading towards the rocky hills where it would be easy to hide. Daniel studied the terrain with experienced eyes, occasionally dismounting to examine specific marks. They're moving fast, but the horses are carrying extra weight with the money, he observed. We'll catch them before noon. As we rode, I felt a mental clarity I'd never experienced before. Every detail around me seemed sharper. The sound of hooves on the earth, the wind in the trees, even the breathing of the men beside me. It was as if my left-handed mind, always forced to adapt and observe the world differently, was finally finding its true purpose. Mabel, Daniel said, his voice low so only I could hear, when we find Frederick, I want you to stay behind us. He might try to use you as a shield. I won't hide anymore, Daniel. I've spent my whole life hiding. He looked at me with an expression that mixed concern and admiration. I know you're brave, but courage doesn't mean unnecessarily exposing yourself to danger. Frederick underestimated me my whole life. Everyone underestimated me. Maybe it's time to use that to my advantage. We found their camp in a clearing surrounded by rocks, exactly where Daniel had predicted. 3 men around a small campfire, the horses tied nearby, the money bags carelessly stacked near the saddles. Frederick had his back to us, gesturing as he spoke to the other 2. Daniel silently signaled the men to position themselves. Within minutes, we had the camp surrounded. My heart raced when Daniel stood up, his gun drawn. "Sheriff, you're surrounded. Drop your weapons." The chaos that followed happened in seconds that felt like hours. Frederick's 2 accomplices grabbed their weapons, but Frederick did something that surprised me. Instead of fighting, he ran directly towards me. "Mabel, you came to save me," he yelled, as if our chase was a romantic rescue. His delusion shocked me. Even at that moment, surrounded and exposed as a criminal, Frederick still believed I was there for him, that somehow I was still the submissive woman he'd known in Hartford. "Frederick, stop!" I yelled, but he kept running towards me. Daniel fired a warning shot, but Frederick didn't stop. When he got too close, something inside me reacted instinctively. My left hand, the same one I'd spent my life hiding, moved with a precision that surprised me. I picked up a rock from the ground and threw it with a force and accuracy that only a left-hander could have at that angle. The rock hit Frederick on the temple, knocking him down immediately. He fell heavily to the ground, stunned but conscious. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of everyone's heavy breathing. The other 2 criminals, seeing their leader fallen and surrounded by guns, dropped their pistols and raised their hands. Daniel approached me, his eyes shining with something I recognized as genuine pride. "Mabel, that was impressive." I looked at my left hand, still trembling from the adrenaline. For the first time in my life, my difference had been not just useful, but heroic. I didn't know I could do that. "You always knew. You just never had the opportunity to find out." As the men tied up the prisoners, Frederick regained consciousness. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine fear. "Mabel, you don't understand. I did this for us. The money would be for our future together." His pathetic attempt to justify the crime filled me not with anger, but with a deep calm. "Frederick, there's no us. There never was. You created a fantasy in your head, and when I didn't fit into it, you tried to force me to change. But your condition, you need someone who accepts you despite it." "Not despite it, Frederick. Because of it." I turned to Daniel, who had observed the entire conversation in silence. "Daniel, can I speak with you privately?" We walked a few steps away from the group. The words I wanted to say had been stuck in my throat for weeks. "Thank you for everything. For helping me on the first day, for introducing me to Dr. Morrison, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "Mabel, you don't have to thank me for seeing who you really are." "And who am I, Daniel?" He approached, his hands gently touching my face. "You're the bravest, smartest, and most determined woman I've ever known. You're someone who turns differences into advantages, who sees solutions where others see problems. You're someone I've fallen completely in love with." My heart stopped. No one had ever spoken to me that way. Even being left-handed? Especially for being left-handed. "Mabel, your difference isn't a flaw to be tolerated. It's part of what makes you extraordinary." Tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of joy. "I love you, Daniel. And I love you, Mabel Rose Thornton, exactly as you are." He knelt right there, in the clearing where we'd captured the criminals, pulling a simple ring from his pocket. "Marry me? Not because you need protection or acceptance, but because I want to spend my life beside the most incredible woman I've ever met." I looked at my left hand, the same one that had just knocked Frederick down, the same one I'd hidden for so long. I extended it to Daniel without hesitation. "Yes." He placed the ring on my finger, and for the first time in my life, I felt that my left hand was exactly where it should be. The ride back to Millbrook was triumphant. The criminals tied up, the money recovered, and I riding beside the man who loved me for who I truly was. When we arrived in town, a crowd was waiting for us on the main street. "Mabel took down the gang leader," Daniel announced, his voice full of pride. The applause that followed surprised me. People I barely knew greeted me, congratulated me on my courage. Children looked at me with admiration. For the first time, being different had made me not an outcast, but a hero. Dr. Morrison approached, her eyes shining with emotion. Mabel, I'm so proud of you, and I see there's more news than just catching the criminals. I showed her my ring, and she smiled broadly. Finally, Daniel had been asking me about rings for weeks. You knew? My dear, the whole town knew. You two were the only ones who didn't notice the obvious. That night, sitting on Dr. Morrison's porch, I contemplated the incredible journey that had brought me there. 6 months ago, I was a lonely and ashamed woman, fleeing an oppressive past in search of an acceptance I thought I'd never find. Now I was a woman who had discovered not just acceptance, but true love. A respected professional, a local hero, a happy fiancé, and all of this not despite being left-handed, but because my difference had made me unique, valuable, special. Daniel joined me on the porch, sitting beside me and taking my left hand in his. What are you thinking about? About how life can change completely when we stop hiding and start accepting ourselves. And about how Kansas Territory has a special way of transforming people. I smiled, looking at the infinite stars in the immense sky. Sign up for the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. It wasn't Kansas that transformed me, Daniel. It was finding people who saw me for who I really am. And who are you, really? I raised my left hand, watching the ring sparkle under the moonlight. I'm Mabel Rose Thornton. I'm left-handed. I'm strong. I'm loved. And finally, I'm free.